Treefort Music Fest is back. That means over 400 artists are taking over downtown Boise, Idaho for nearly a week starting March 26th through the 30th. Headliners include Sophie Tucker, Remy Wolf, Shaky Graves, Bright Eyes, Amel and the Sniffers, and so much more. 5-day GA passes start at $366, and you'll want to grab them now because prices are going up on March 1st. There's also single-day or main stage-only passes and a bunch of other combinations and packages, including hotel and fort badges, which can all be found at treefortmusicfest.com/tickets. That's treefortmusicfest.com/tickets. Today on CityCast Portland, we're talking about the first meetup of the city's new housing committee, an eyebrow raising $7 million the city is lending to a startup, and why Republican state legislators want to do away with a statewide wildfire hazard map. Joining me on this week's Friday News Roundup are author and Willamette Week reporter Brianna Wheeler and our very own producer Giulia Fiaoni. It's Friday, February 21st. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Welcome, everyone, to the Friday News Roundup. Brianna, Giulia, thank you for hanging out with me this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hello.
If you are absolutely new to the show, welcome. Today is the day we break down some of the biggest local stories of the week with some of the best and brightest journalists in town. But before we jump into the news, I usually ask an opening question so our listeners can get to know our guests a little better. And today's opening question is actually related to yesterday's episode, which was all about tipping and Portland's tipping culture. It's a re-air. We decided to air it again because it's a listener favorite. Like when we aired it the first time, people just could not stop emailing us their thoughts about tipping. So if you haven't heard it yet, give it a listen. But because it was a re-air, I wasn't able to do my usual Thursday event listing at the end of the episode, so I was hoping you two could help me and our listeners out with just like a pick or two of some events you are most excited about that are coming up.
Oh, me first.
Okay.
Go.
Call me. Okay, so I am actually super excited to go check out the 1803 Project is putting on this like Black History Museum pop-up downtown.
Oh.
So they took over one of the buildings downtown, and it's got, I think it's 3 stories of historical exhibits. And then I think on the top floor, and I'm not sure if it's going on this weekend, hopefully, fingers crossed, because I'm going, Meso is putting on their Makers Market up there.
Oh.
I know, so exciting, right? So it's like
That's
it could be like a
awesome.
whole day of coolness.
I've never heard of the 1803 project.
New to me too. I was doing some work with, Vanport Studio. We were talking about the small business incubation that they do, and the 1803 project came up, and we got into it, and I learned about the pop-up history museum, and now I'm like so freaking excited to go visit it.
That's so cool.
I have another date-related
okay.
adjacent event for you.
Jump on in, Giulia.
This one stems from a show that I went to at the 1905. And
Are we just
What the
giving
heck?
out dates?
if you don't
What
know,
are we doing over here? All right, 1905.
if you don't know the 1905, it's a jazz club on Mississippi. And just a few weeks ago, I got to see the Mel Brown B3 organ group there. If you don't know Mel Brown, he's like one of the OG Portland jazz drummers. He's been playing for decades. I think he's like 80-something years old now.
Wow.
It was incredible. I had such a good time that I want to plug the next time they're playing, which is next Thursday, February 27th. But it's going to be at the Jack London Review this time, 8 p.m. Tickets are about $30. It's tied to the Portland Jazz Festival if you haven't heard about that. But yeah, go check it out. This is actually an event I pulled from our Hey Portland newsletter event list, which you can also access on our website, portland.citycast.fm. There's so many things to do there as well if you're looking for things to go and check out in the next week.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard about the Biamp Jazz Festival, Brianna, but it's crazy. It's like,
Yes.
I mean, they even brought Erykah Badu.
They brought
Yeah.
Erykah Badu.
Which is crazy,
It's a huge
you
It's
know?
so crazy.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Whenever I think of Erykah Badu, is just like the diss that people would give each other whenever they would have head wraps and they look dumb, which was Erykah but don't.
Oh, no.
That was just like a thing that went over in my school. You know when you like try something and you look terrible, you're like, nah, girl, you look like Erica Badon't. Anyhow. So,
That's so funny.
we're kind of mean in East LA. Okay, so my event is next Thursday and Friday. Amadeus is playing The Schnitzer. So it's the movie Amadeus, which is a silly romp. You know, it's about Mozart and his rivalry with some other dude. The unbeknownst to him, of course, in the movie, because it's Mozart. The way he's played like just like an idiot child. Anyhow, so the movie is accompanied by a live performance of the score with the Oregon Symphony and a full chorus. And if you've seen this movie, it's some of the most amazing music. So it's going to be bonkers. And I have tickets for the Friday show. I'm so excited. Everyone should go.
That does sound so exciting.
Heck yeah.
Support your local symphony.
For reals.
Symphony is great.
It's seriously, and the tickets were like $40-something.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's not that much, you know?
Considering
A movie and a whole freaking chorus and a symphony. Come on.
you're going to remember this for the rest of your life.
I will.
And it only costs $44. It's amazing.
I will.
This is a bargain.
Thank you both for your answers. I appreciate it. Hope some people listening got some ideas for what to do in the next few weeks. On to the news of the week. Okay, so last week in Portland, the first round of Portland City Council policy committee meetings occurred. And so these 8 committees are how our city council plan to tackle everything from like homelessness and housing to climate, transportation, public safety, so much more. Eight things. Yeah. So Taylor Griggs and Courtney Vaughn from the Portland Mercury wrote a couple of articles detailing some of what went down in these meetings. And Brianna, you looked into the first big moves of our city council's homelessness and housing committee. Like, what are they cooking up?
All right, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the new housing committee taking on Portland's affordability crisis. And the story comes courtesy of Courtney Vaughn. So yes, the first round of Portland City Council policy meetings. Woohoo! Our fancy new government that is shaking up the scene, breaking glass ceilings, etc. Those meetings kicked off on February 10th. What they're doing is laying the groundwork for how the city is going to handle everything: economy, homelessness, housing, climate, infrastructure, transportation, public safety, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So among the most impactful policies that's going to come up for consideration is legislation that is coming from District 3 Councilor Angelita Morillo. And this is a proposal to ban the use of anti-competitive rental practices, including, like especially, algorithmic pricing software that is being used by corporate landlords. So I have to ask, do either of you have corporate landlords? Are you like caught in that web?
Personally, no.
Who is your landlord? Just some guy?
Actually, wait. You know what? I take that back. I feel like it feels like it's not because it feels quaint and there's only one person running the show. But they are tied to a larger company. It's Bristol Urban, which I don't know much about them, but they are kind of like corporate landlords in disguise. They don't ever really show their faces.
So I own my home. I'm my own corporate landlord. I'm doing a terrible job keeping things livable. Let me tell you, I'm a terrible landlord. But I had like mom and pop, landlords. It's night and day. I know everyone's like, let's kill the landlord. It's like they're mom and pop landlords and there are corporate landlords. Sure, mom and pop landlords can also suck. But let me tell you, the ones I had, it's the reason I have a house. They were so nice. They were able to give us breaks. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. It really is. I have like mom and pop landlords too, but I've also had corporate landlords. And it's night and day. In my corporate landlorded home, they would just fall into disrepair in such a fucking grandiose way. My mom and pop landlords are like, I have like an open relationship. I can just call somebody. I can call the person that owns the house.
It really is a different vibe.
Yeah. Especially when we're talking about rental prices and we're talking about the competition that occurs and what is occurring in these corporate landlord circles. So this was part of Murillo's campaign. Like she talked about the impacts that these companies have. So there is a specific company that's under the eye of like the Department of Justice right now. They've filed a lawsuit against this company called RealPage. So RealPage is a company that collects and shares private rental income data with property owners as part of a larger rental price fixing scheme that completely annihilates any competition. And it's part of the reason that rents are so freaking high.
Yeah.
So like I said, the Department of Justice, they already filed a lawsuit against RealPage. And a bunch of other attorney generals jumped on to this lawsuit. Oregon, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Minnesota, fucking North Carolina, Oregon, Tennessee, and Washington. So the allegation is that this pricing algorithm violates antitrust laws. It deprives renters of the benefits of competition. And the complaint includes 6 of the country's biggest landlords. They oversee 1.3 million housing units in 43 states.
Oh my gosh.
Right? So the complaint asserts that the property company's use of algorithmic pricing allows them to collude, keeping rents high, never offering lower rents, and really not enticing new tenants. So Murillo previously worked as a policy advocate for Partners for Hunger-Free Oregon, and she's very candid about her experiences with housing instability. So this has been part of her platform. She kind of wrapped up with this quote, and I think it's a cool thing to kind of like leave on. Quote, "I think that we are in a time where renters' rights are going to be really important. Making sure that we keep people housed long term is going to be really important." So, Portlanders, the next Homelessness and Housing Committee meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, February 25th. That is next week.
Well, one thing that I really admired from what Angelita said was she's thinking about creating policy on the city level that eventually seeps into the state.
Yeah.
She very smartly, which is, Eastern Oregon's whole complaint, but she very smartly was like, we're Portland. We're the most populous city in the state. What we say can go. So she's actually looking at how she can affect state policy. She's like, if it passes here, like it has a good opportunity to pass at the state level. I don't know. I was just like, go girl. Like, go
I know, right?
Yeah, why not, right?
Yes.
I think one thing I also really appreciated about some of the details in this article was just seeing all the different perspectives at the table in these committees, because you had Councilor Murillo, who has personal experience with homelessness, but then you also had District 1 Councilor Jamie Dunphy, who is a landlord himself.
A landlord himself.
Which is so interesting.
And he had a really good, this is an idea that has been floated on the podcast as well. Like we keep talking about this, which is the vacancy tax. A landlord, small.
Yes.
And by landlord, he literally has one other house that he probably lived at one point and moved and rented. So that's the thing. When people are saying landlord and they're just thinking, a lord of land, it's like he moved from a house he bought. He probably still owes money on it and there's someone living there. Anyhow, he's like, hey, I think we could really look into vacancy tax. And like, if you don't know what that is, it's just a type of tax on properties, either commercial or residential, that are unoccupied or vacant for a specified amount of time, and it's supposed to incentivize usage, right? To increase housing supply in areas with high residential vacancy rates. And I looked into it and I'm like, well, who in America? Because I know it's a big deal in Canada. And I was like, why isn't it something that we hear a lot in America? And this is why. Utah was one of the earliest adopters back in 1982. And the speculation here, it's me. This is me talking. I wonder if it's because of all the vacation homes in that state and because of, so they were just like, half of our shit is like unoccupied and people live in Utah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they had to figure something out to like not erase the local economy. Here's the thing. Washington, D.C. also has a vacancy tax, which makes sense because why? Because it's so seasonal with workers that come in, lawmakers. Do you know, like people have a house in D.C. or whatever, but there's a local community that lives there, Very recently, Oakland, Berkeley, and San Francisco. So the places that I told you from my deep Googling, those are the only other American states or cities that I found that use a vacancy tax. So if we incorporated, Portland would be still part of that vanguard. And I just think that we should really look into it because living in St. John's, I'm looking at commercial buildings that have been empty since I moved in 4 years ago.
Fucking decades shit up in St. John's all through. Yeah.
And I've heard stories of people like, oh, that's like an actual business that has more than 2 locations wanting to go in and then just being laughed at, be like, you can't afford this, right? Do you know what I mean? It's like, wouldn't it be great if they could though? And
Right.
like this community had more than like 3 things. Come on, man.
Totally.
It's for the benefit of these communities. So anyhow, I'm pretty stubborn about vacancy taxes. Anyone listening, if you're just like, this is why they suck, please let me know. Because right now I'm like so gung-ho. I'm going to make
Me
a shirt.
too.
I'm going to make a shirt.
Dude, I'll buy that merch.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break here. And when we come back, more headlines of the week. The 2025 Buy-In Portland Jazz Festival is coming this Thursday, February 20th through March 1st. That's 10 days of nonstop jazz, blues, funk, and everything in between. And this year's lineup is incredible. They have over 70 events happening all over Portland, so you can experience R&B legend Erykah Badu at the Moda Center, or hear songwriter Lizzie No bring her soulful and poetic sounds to Polaris Hall. You can also see Panamanian-born Chicago-based DJ and drummer Daniel Villarreal light up the get down with his progressive funk, or witness Norwegian genre benders Orion Spelt bring their global instrumental sounds at Star Theater. There are so many other amazing artists that are playing, and again, it's happening all over town. PDX Jazz is bringing it. So get your tickets now at pdxjazz.org. That's pdxjazz.org.
What sort of promises have you made to yourself this year? Maybe get in better shape or eat healthier, save more money, travel somewhere new. What about discovering a new culture by learning a new language? With Babbel, you can do that in just a few weeks. I'm CityCast CEO David Plotz, and I'm having such a good time learning Spanish on Babbel this year. I'm taking a trip to Mexico City in the spring, and Babbel is giving me the Spanish foundation that's going to make my trip so much better. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons, handcrafted by more than 200 language experts, get you to begin speaking your new language in 3 weeks, or at whatever pace you choose. And because conversing is the key to really understanding each other in a new language, Babbel is designed using practical, real-world conversations. And one way they do that is with their own podcasts. I'm a podcast listener. I'm guessing since you're listening to this podcast, you are too. And I have been getting ready for my Mexico City trip by listening to Babbel's conversational podcasts. There's a short conversation you listen to, then an instructor talks you through what happened, and then you listen again, and then you catch everything when you listen that second time. There's also a great read-along transcript, too, which I love. The one I did today was with Maria and Carmela trying to make dinner plans, but Carmela is so busy. She's way too busy with work and yoga, but finally they agreed on brunch on Saturday. Studies from Yale, Michigan State, and other universities continue to prove that Babbel works. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. So let's get more of you talking in a new language. Babbel is gifting CityCast listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/CityCast. Spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Babbel.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
So my story this week is almost like a continuation of my story last week, because it seems Willamette Week Sophie Peel has a new beat, and it's Old Town.
Yeah.
Last week, if you guys don't remember, I shared reporting from an Old Town Community Association meeting Sophie attended, and all the tension and the drama and the dynamics that was going on. Old Town Community Association, if you don't remember, it's basically the collection of all the businesses and the cultural institutions in that area, which is, Old Town Chinatown.
Yeah.
So this week, Sophie is reporting on a $7 million loan from Prosper Portland to an athletic apparel incubator hoping to lay down roots in Old Town, which sounds cool, honestly, but it's raising a lot of eyebrows, especially from the Old Town Community Association, people who are also have been there for decades, Many are wondering what is going on with all this money, and it matters to them because there's a finite amount of money that is supposed to get pumped in Old Town by the city.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so this would be a significant chunk of it. So just a couple things to wrap your heads around. Prosper Portland is the Economic and Urban Development Agency for the city of Portland. So it sounds like a different organization because it's Portland and we're confusing, but it's part of the city of Portland. Most of their funding, like 90% of it, comes from debt proceeds generated through tax increment financing or TIFs. And like another deep Google I did, tax increment funding is a public funding method that uses taxes on future gains in property values to pay for new infrastructure improvements, usually in a specific district, also called a TIF district. I think Sophie did a brilliant job of kind of laying this out, so I'm going to quote her here. Prosper Portland draws a line around a troubled area of the city. It borrows against future property tax revenues in this district, the new one they just drew, for the next several decades. New property taxes over, let's say, a base revenue that is decided on, stay inside that district instead of going to the city's general fund. There's a bit more that goes on, in this finance structure, but that's the layman terms. It's circular and peak capitalism and honestly kind of brilliant. Okay, so tax increment funding is used all across America. This isn't like Prosper Portland created this.
Yeah.
It actually was created way back in California in like 1952. And the city of Portland has something like 14 TIF districts being managed by Prosper Portland right now. And Old Town is part of one of these TIF districts. This year alone, like I was saying, Prosper is planning on spending $35 million in Old Town using funds from a larger TIF district. It's part of that they started way back in 1998. Honestly, again, brilliant and effective way to use rising property values of one part of town to help another, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So back to this controversial loan, this athletic apparel incubator made in Old Town, which is a catchy name.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is a super ambitious venture hoping to build a shoe and athletic apparel manufacturing company in Old Town. They asked Prosper Portland for a $7 million loan to finance the purchase of 2 mostly vacant commercial buildings. The big dream is to eventually buy 9 buildings in Old Town and fill them with 3D printers, innovation workspaces, manufacturing equipment, which will hopefully bring in dozens of athletic apparel businesses to that area. According to Prosper, Made in Old Town already has 8 letters of intent from interested tenants, and there are people like Under Armour's executive vice president of brand strategy and a former chief sustainability officer on Nike on the venture's decision-making team. So it sounds great, you're like, okay, right.
Yeah.
But here's why people are a little skeptical.
Oh, no.
First off, the loan Prosper Portland gave Made in Old Town actually goes against their own guidelines for commercial loans. So a guideline they wrote just like a little under a year ago states that a maximum loan they give out should be $5 million tops. The interest rate should match the 10-year treasury bond yield plus a margin, which is currently about 7%. And the construction payback period should not exceed 5 years. They're giving Made in Old Town $7 million at 3% with a timeline of 15 years to pay back.
Whoa.
So, yeah. Okay. Also, the 2 buildings Made in Old Town wants to purchase are currently appraised at $3.8 million, but for some reason, they're contracted to pay their current owners $7.4 million. So aside from it being a risky loan to begin with, the very large discrepancy in what the buildings are valued and what the startup is paying places Prosper's loan to value ratio, or LTV, at 182%, which is not good. If you're just like not a numbers person,
God.
that's like a predatory LTV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I clutched my pearls.
Like, what is the city going to repossess from a startup? Dreams? Good intentions? Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, if they default.
Blood, sweat, and tears.
So the article quotes Portland City Councilor Mitch Green, who represents the city's west side, which is where this district is, and used to work as an economist, saying, I want to know we're good stewards of public money. Yeah. A loan on those speculative terms with no business plan, as far as I can tell. It's basically the city saying, we don't expect the money to ever come back. Now, before I share a couple more reasons why some leaders in the city and the state are doubting Made in Old Town's solubility, what do you guys think?
Oh my God. Well, I love the concept. I love the concept.
It's a cool concept.
But like, it's a little hollow, a little bit of a shell of a thing. And then also, I mean.
Oh, it gets shellier. Go on.
Oh, it does?
Oh my God, yes.
I feel the same way as Brianna. I just want to hear more about some of this drama that Sophie pulled apart, because I know it connects to last week's story and I want to hear about these details.
You guys, I want you to know that I used to cover arts and culture. And whenever anyone at the newsroom at OPB tried to give me like a newsier story, I'd just be like, ew, get away. No, arts and culture. And now that I've been forced to just like dive into news, I'm like, nobody told me it was this insane. Like that it was like so much drama. I would have been here had I known.
So much to it,
years ago. Okay, so so Prosper Portland says it's willing to go along with the deal again, one they themselves have written as a bad one, because they have faith that Made in Old Town will find an additional $4.4 million in funding needed to complete the improvements on the two buildings they're hoping to buy, raising their value to $13.8 million, which is roughly 3.5 times their current appraisal value at 3.8, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So where is Made in Old Town hoping to get $4.4 million from? Is it guaranteed? No. They're hoping that they'll get it from the state. Who, by the way, already allocated $2 million from them last year. So they think somehow they're going to get $4.4 million more.
Huh?
Also, Made in Old Town has stated in public documents that it only has $1.2 million in private capital. So they pretty much want to fund their entire venture with public funds by simply moving one pot of public funds into another pot of public funds. And check this shit out. Last year, the regional government, Metro, rejected a request by Made in Old Town in conjunction with the city's Bureau of Planning and Sustainability for a mere $662,000 grant. They wouldn't even give them a grant.
Wow.
You don't have to pay back less than $1 million. And the rejection letter stated, applicant did not demonstrate demand for industry cluster in this area, no proof of financial feasibility, unproven and unsubstantiated proof of project progress, and Made in Old Town is an unknown entity. Metro also saw even more red flags, specifically that $320,000 of that money, which is like nearly half, would be paid to a consulting firm that was founded by one of the principal dudes from Made in Old Town. Another $66,000 would have gone to a second contractor, Equity Development Lab, which of course, that sounds nice, who is, surprise, another main guy from Made in Old Town. And the treasurer of the Old Town Community Association Board, Jonathan Cohen, who is also married to the chair of the OTCA board, Jesse Burke, who owns the Society Hotel building. We are back to my story from last week. And please listen to last week's Friday News Roundup if you want more details on the OTCA board and their current dynamic. And just a reminder that in the midst of all this, Lansu Chinese Garden, the Japanese American Museum of Oregon, and Portland Chinatown Museum are all being like, I'm sorry, what now?
Yeah.
The zoning on my block is changing to light industrial. Where does that leave us? They have no clue what is going on with any of this, and they feel like they're being left in the dark, and they are part of the Old Town Community Association.
Fucking arguably the biggest part.
So there are shadier details that honestly we just don't have time to cover. So if you're more curious about the story, I implore you, dear listener, please read Sophie's article. It's so good. We'll link it to our show notes as usual. Well, guys, now that you have more info, and trust me, there is more. What do you guys think?
This is so gangster.
I have to add in this detail
about please.
Some more of that info, how it relates back to the OTCA. And it's the fact that Prosper Portland was saying that they were regularly meeting with just a few specific folks from the OTCA. Of course, Jonathan Cohen, the treasurer, and Jesse Burke, the chair, who you've already mentioned. All the while, the OTCA's saying, we had no say in how the money was spent. So there's some sort of regular meeting, but there's also no say in how the money is spent.
Yeah, from the board is, not the, because here's the thing. The OTCA has a board and then the members, And so the board, mainly comprised of Jesse Burke and Jonathan Cohen, have regularly been meeting with Prosper Portland, but they're telling everyone, like, we have no say in how the money is being spent. But yet, here's an almost like ridiculous $7 million loan.
Yeah.
And here's the deal. It's a really cool idea, but it's so unproven.
I have also just one more quote to add from the lovely Sophie Peel. And this was tied to what you were explaining, Claudia, about how Made in Old Town is using one pot of public money to access another. She follows the line with, Kotek is unhappy with that. And I love the simplicity of
She is
that
very
line.
unhappy with that.
I was like, I loved it. I loved it.
Kotek was not
Oh my God.
that stoked about allocating $2 million last year. She was one of the few people that was like, no. Who are these people?
Yeah.
Could we not do this? And so when this happened, she's like, and they want 4.4 more. You know what I mean? So now the state is like,
She is unhappy with that.
Oh. Okay, so let's take another break here. And when we return, more headlines of the week.
Building a portfolio with Fidelity Basket Portfolios is kind of like making a sandwich. It's as simple as picking your stocks and ETFs, sort of like your meats and other toppings, and managing it as one big, juicy investment. Now that's pretty good. Learn more at fidelity.com/baskets. Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC. Member NYSE SIPC.
This is an ad from BetterHelp Online Therapy. We always hear about the red flags to avoid in relationships, but it's just as important to focus on the green flags. If you're not quite sure what they look like, therapy can help you identify those qualities so you can embody the green flag energy and find it in others. BetterHelp offers therapy 100% online, and sign-up only takes a few minutes. Visit BetterHelp.com today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com.
Okay, Giulia, what you got?
So my reporting comes from Alex Jensen at KGW, and they're talking about how Republican lawmakers want to revoke Oregon's wildfire risk assessment map. Now, to be completely honest, this was the first time I had really heard about this map. So for listeners who don't know either, it's basically a map of all of Oregon highlighting wildfire risk. High risk areas are, for example, in Southeast and Central Oregon, and low risk, like right on the coast or in urbanized areas like Salem and Portland. But we'll link it in the show notes if you want to check it out. So the map is developed and maintained by Oregon State University and the Oregon Department of Forestry because of a law that was passed back in 2021. And the reason for this map is for three purposes. And these are pulled right from the government map website. The first reason being to educate Oregon residents and property owners about the residents and owners' wildfire exposure. The second, to assist in prioritizing fire adaptation and mitigation resources for the most vulnerable locations. And the third, to identify where defensible space and fire hardening standards and codes will apply. And only properties that are both high hazard and in the, quote, wildland urban interface are required to meet certain codes to prevent wildfires from spreading, like trimming trees and stuff. There's also a funny little note on this page in italics at the bottom of this list, basically saying, hey, we're not responsible for how people use this information, which brings me to my next point. So Republicans are claiming this map has skyrocketed insurance rates and also negatively impacted land values, which, according to folks in high-risk areas, they're not totally off with that claim. When the map was originally published in 2022, many homeowners said their insurance rates suddenly doubled, tripled, and in some cases, insurers dropped them altogether. But before I continue, I want to know, do you guys know about this map before having read about it recently? Is this something that you both were familiar with, or is this a totally new thing?
I was familiar with the map, but reading the article was the first time I kind of really looked at it and saw oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I could see the positive and the negative of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I didn't know we had our own wildfire risk map. I know that insurance companies have these maps that they created themselves. I knew about that.
That's a later point I'll get to. But it's interesting. I feel like for folks who are in more rural areas, this is just a lot more important because so much of the map that's in that dark orange color are rural parts of Oregon. But anyway, so since 2022, multiple versions of the map were released with tons of backlash until the map was actually approved last year. And in that time, legislators also passed Senate Bill 82, which, quote, prohibits insurance companies from basing rates on the maps. But the tough part about that law is that it does not prevent insurance companies from creating and referencing their own wildfire risk maps, which could possibly look the exact same as the state map.
So ultimately, I feel for rural homeowners many don't have funds to just pack it up and move somewhere.
Yeah.
And insurance companies refusing to give people living in certain areas coverage is something we've heard from people living in Florida and other areas that are
California too.
that are more harshly affected by climate change.
Yeah.
But from what I read, you guys, the Republicans aren't like, hey, we don't want this map. Bill sponsor, Senator Daniel Bonham, basically is like, we would love local decision-making approach to this wildfire risk management. Rather than a statewide risk classification, this would be done through county classification meetings made up of members from the state fire marshal and forestry agencies, as well as landowners within that boundary as a preference over a more one-size-fits-all system. And the way I see it, rural Oregonians already feel super disconnected from the state, which you cannot blame them.
Yeah.
If you listen to the show, they can't even fucking get here.
I mean? The public transportation is insane.
Transportation sucks. So they're just saying, look, we know we're going to get fucking pummeled with a switch. Can we go pick the switch?
Oh, God.
That's what they're essentially saying, because they're not idiots. They know the insurance companies are coming down on them. I think they're just like, as they're coming down on us, can we please save some money on some what the regulations will be?
Yeah.
Or the ones who see more of what's happening should know that the state map isn't going to directly affect their insurance when it comes down to it, because the insurance people have always had their own maps.
Yeah.
And they don't care about resources, because that's what the state map is ultimately trying to do, is okay, how much money do we have to set aside and where do we need more resources to put out the fire? So, but I get why rural people are just and the regulations. Do you know what I'm saying? That sucks.
And what's interesting too is that there's also complaints about the map that it's just too arbitrary, which is why I think what you mentioned, Claudia, that more localized approach kind of makes sense, because there's some neighbors that are like, hey, my literal next door neighbor has a different risk assessment than me. I don't understand why this is the case. Maybe folks aren't coming out here and literally looking at my property in detail, which has led to some folks actually contesting their risk designation in the form of an appeal to the Oregon Department of Forestry, which in the meantime, Governor Kotek just recently this week put a temporary pause on hearing those appeals through the end of the legislative session, possibly in late June, because she doesn't want any conflicts to come up between lawmakers while map changes are being made and appeals are being heard. She just doesn't want it to get messy. But a lot of lawmakers felt pretty lukewarm about this. And I think what it comes down to is they just want to redo the whole thing and just go at it a different way. Yeah. And it's tough because, like you mentioned, Claudia, insurance companies are always going to have their own maps, and they've already seen the state map. It's not like it disappears and they pretend, hey, I never actually saw that thing. So there are going to be issues regardless. But I think that extra bit of work on the local level may actually make a difference and give folks, give homeowners, more to stand on when it comes to knowing exactly what the risks are.
Well, I think homeowners are doing their own risk assessments also, making their own adjustments to their properties. This, it feels arbitrary because these conditions change too rapidly to just do this blanket, like you said, the one-size-fits-all approach to this. This is the fire map and this is how it's going to go. When there are communities that are making efforts to create a safer environment, are they taking that into account?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just hope that these rural communities fully understand that eradicating all of the state, maps, risk maps, isn't going to lessen their risk designation, and it isn't going to stop the insurance companies from making their own more stringent maps. And I know that the reason why people wanted the first state map gone is because they were just as soon as that map came out, all of the insurance companies, whatever. And I'm just that could also be a correlation.
Yeah. Correlation or causation?
I'm sure that they're just you made them look at us, and it's yeah, trust me, they're looking at you.
They were looking.
They're looking.
Yeah.
Oh man, what a bummer. And if you see the map, you guys, you're just well, that's most of Oregon.
No, it is most of Oregon.
It is most of we are Tinder. We're just except for the developed parts. And I mean, that's so scary to be not in the developed parts and loving your lifestyle and loving, your land and all this, and just getting that realization of this isn't going away.
Yeah. The
fight that we're seeing, a lot of this stuff is guys, you have to understand, this is human nature. You're telling them that they got to change their existence. And I know it's like, well, we'll fucking do it. It's like, that's sad. Like, that's kind of messed up. Like, so they've had a property for decades and they, again, don't have money to move. Like, it's just, I wish the state found a more human approach. That's all. I don't know what that is. I'm just saying, I'm like, I wish. Just like, I wish.
You gotta take that to the Old Town Wish Factory.
I'm going to take it to the Wish Factory. Thank you. Me and fucking Made in Old Town are just going to wish. We're going to hold hands and wish.
$7 million worth of wishes, baby.
Oh my God. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Thanks for going through these headlines. I really appreciate it. Brianna, Giulia, as always, a pleasure.
Likewise.
Thanks, Claudia.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. We hope you have a great weekend. That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thank you so much for listening. Our podcast production team this week was Giulia Fiaoni and Selena C.A. Reynolds. Our Hey Portland newsletter editor is Rachel Monahan, and our host is me, Claudia Meza. Original music by Jenny Conley and Stephen Drizos. Additional music by Epidemic Sound and All the Kimonos. We'll be back Monday morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.